Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. We have a solo video today and we're going to deep dive into Theo Hernandez being sold from Milan to Al Hilal. So before we get into that, I just want to thank all of you for your support. So please like, subscribe, and comment on today's video on what you think about Theo's sale. Alright guys, so sad to say, it looks like Theo Hernandez is on his way out of Milan to Al Hilal. According to multiple reports, Fabrizio Romano, Moretto, Vitiello, name whoever you want, they've said it at this point. Theo is likely on his way to Al Hilal, and Milan are going to get a fee around 30 million euro. Simone Inzaghi gave him a call, said for him to come and join him at Al Hilal. Theo was really out of options at this point. It was fairly obvious that he wasn't going to be staying at Milan, and with that, he wanted to go to some other top European clubs, none of which actually wanted to pay up for him. The one name and team that we saw that is relatively prestigious was Atletico Madrid. He was a fan of the club growing up, but they didn't end up wanting to pay more than 20 million for him, which is pretty damning because Theo, still on his day, is one of the best left backs, if not the best in the world, and Atletico was still not willing to meet the price, even with 1 year left on his contract at age 27. I think that was pretty telling for him. And after a certain point, Theo had to make a serious decision in a World Cup year. Was he going to stay at Milan, probably be sitting in the stands, or go to a club that's actually going to pay him a substantial amount of money and give him a try to at least play well? And he's going to be under a top-class manager in Simone Inzaghi. But it was fairly obvious after what we had seen within the transfer market that no top club wanted to go after Theo, so he ended up settling for Al Hilal, which he's going to be probably making that transfer within the next week or so. So let's talk about Theo Hernandez and his career at Milan, because I think it deserves a lot of positive talk, especially considering all that he accomplished within the 5 to 6 years that he was at the club. First and foremost, his quality that we saw immediately was just shining. His debuts off of the bench, Ricardo Rodriguez was still starting over him when we initially saw Gianpaolo arrive, but the second Theo Hernandez got that job, he did not look back. We're talking about the all-time leading goal scorer for defensive players in Milan's history. This is one of the greatest clubs in the entire world, and the fact that he was reigning supreme above all these top and legendary defenders says a lot about him. I also think he's the second best left back in Milan's history, and you know, there are a lot of players throughout the years, but for me, especially considering what we saw from Paolo Maldini and after him, there is no question on who the best was, and it's certainly Theo Hernandez. We're always going to remember his amazing runs and ball carrying ability, 60, 70 yards, especially that goal against Atalanta, forever remembered in their push for that 19th Scudetto. We're never going to forget moments like that. Even his goal against Inter in the Supercoppa this year as well. Sure, there were a lot of low moments, which we'll get into, but the positives were always outweighing the good. I mean, there were very few left backs in the entire history of the sport, let alone in Milan's history, that were capable of doing the things that he was capable of doing. I mean, his link-up play with Leao was absolutely mesmerizing, and him athletically, this is one of the fastest and strongest players that we have seen within Serie A. We're talking about sprinting 60, 70 yards on a consistent basis. Very few players are capable of even doing that 2 to 3 times within a match. We saw him do this week in, week out, no rest, no proper backup for essentially his entire tenure at Milan, which is probably what caused his decline. I mean, very few players were playing this many matches, that many minutes on a consistent basis, and to be fair, he never really complained much about it, because these days in football, these guys play more than ever before, and on top of it, the pace of play is faster and stronger than we've ever seen as well. So what he was able to do over the course of half a decade at Milan was absolutely fantastic. But eventually the negatives started to outweigh the positives. I mean, we started to see really poor leadership issues. And for me, when someone like Paolo Maldini leaves, sure, it could hurt guys on a day-to-day basis. The total ethos of the club, we know that the sacking of Maldini was disastrous. But I saw a lot of excuse-making for Theo Hernandez and how his mentality and his positivity was down in the toilet just because Paolo Maldini left, which I have a real issue with, because it doesn't matter who the director, who the owner is, and who management is. If you're putting on these colors, you have to put in 100% effort. We saw in just this season alone so many negatives, right? We see Theo not tracking back against Parma. We see him in the penalty debacle against Fiorentina, taking a penalty away from Christian Pulisic on 2 separate occasions, then getting sent off within that match. We also see the Lazio Watergate incident, where the guy actually isn't staying with the rest of the team, as well as Rafael Leao. That's just really poor optics that we saw on a consistent basis for him. And then finally, that red card against Feyenoord, which basically cost Milan to go into the next round of the knockout stages in the Champions League. It cost them money. It cost them pride and so many other things. And I think that was just such a negative for Theo Hernandez. And there's no real excuse for him, right? If you're tired, sure, sit. I understand that. You were playing tons of minutes. That's not necessarily on you. But the way he plays and his style over the course of his career, he's only going to decline in his 20s. And Milan doing a really poor job of negotiating and handling his situation for a contract extension, regardless of what he was asking for. Rumors were 8 to 9 million euro net per season, which is astronomically high. He didn't really deserve that. But at the same time, Milan should have negotiated something that was definitely more doable for him and them, because now he's going to be playing in Saudi Arabia, which is a step down. It doesn't matter what Milan's situation is. It's not better than what he would be doing at this current moment in time. And I think that's just really disappointing to see from one of the better players in the past couple of decades at the club. And to be quite honest with you, I don't have much excuses to make for him. I thought his play had dropped off in the past 18 months, and you can even go back to 24 months. His season prior, when Milan finished second when Stefano Pioli's final season, I thought there were a lot of ups and downs with him. Sure, he was playing great at the center back position, but there were way too many inconsistencies, and his defensive abilities were really poor. Man marking, tracking back, and doing the very important things of a defensive player that he was incapable of doing, and it only got worse this past season. So whether or not that has to do with a mentality, that has to do with structure and the players around him, the steep decline was there the entire time. There were signs of it. And I'm really disappointed that we weren't able to keep a player like this. But if you're Milan with 1 year left on the contract, getting 30 million euro for this player while no other top club in Europe wants him, it's sad to say, but it is a good deal for Milan on paper. Now we'll get into what they're going to do after this. What do Milan do next? They're not going to be able to replace Theo Hernandez. I think we all know this. Regardless if we thought that they should sell him or keep him, it's going to be really difficult to replace a player like this. And a lot of the names that Milan are linked to are kind of laughable in my opinion. Destiny Udogie, Andrea Cambiaso of Juventus. These players are going to cost upwards of at least 40 million. And Milan aren't going to invest in that. They're not going to spend their record net transfer on a player that is just going to be a left-back replacement. I don't see that happening. Sure, those names are super talented and I really like them, but the realistic possibility of those two players joining is just unrealistic. And to be honest with you, that's what makes this move even more frustrating, because Milan could have kept a player like this for at least a couple more seasons, regardless of decline. Where are you going to go out there and find somebody? Sure, Igliatare might deserve some leeway to find a player, but nobody has trust in this management and ownership to replace a top player like Theo Hernandez, just like we didn't trust them to replace Sandro Tonali, and we don't trust them to replace Tijani Reinders as well. This is just another one of those moves that looks good in terms of finances, but in terms of sporting direction, this is a positive in the worst way. And that just means that they're only spending and getting money for when they find it opportune, and not actually replacing them and upgrading the player. This, in the long run, does not look that good. And their internal options are who? Alex Jimenez? I don't really trust them to replace anybody at this current moment in time with positivity, and that means ownership and management really have to earn the trust back of the entire fan base, or actually earn the trust for the first time, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think this ownership and management group are never going to have the trust of the fan base, and the only time that they will be cheering for them is when they're walking out the door and sell the club eventually. But for me, guys, I don't know what they're going to do at the left back position. You guys let me know in the comments section on who you want as a replacement. You guys let me know your favorite Theo Hernandez moment during his entire tenure at Milan. Thank you, Theo Hernandez, for an amazing career at AC Milan. Best of luck in your future.